Hey, how's it going, Taylor?
Hi, how are you?
Hi, can you hear me?
We have a few additional people who signed up, so I will give it about 5 minutes and we'll see who else hops on. Do you want to, can you test it one more time, Campbell?
Can you hear anything I'm saying?
Yes, I can.
Okay, cool. Just want to make sure.
Yeah.
I will be back.
Welcome to everybody who's joining us. We're giving it a few more minutes to give everyone an opportunity to hop on. Just so you know, my name is Taylor Watson. I'm the operations officer at the Dedalians and run our virtual flight. Thank you so much for joining us. In a little bit here, after we've given people a few additional minutes, we'll have Captain Campbell begin his presentation for us. He and I attended college together and are college buddies, and I'll let you talk about yourself beyond that, but he's one of my favorite people. So I think you'll really enjoy learning from him this evening. So.
Taylor, this is Roy. I don't have video, so I'm going to back out and start all over again.
Okay, I am monitoring, so I should be able to let you back in.
Can you see if can you get me video, or is that a good plan for I start over?
Are you working off of a computer?
Yeah, my home computer.
Okay, if you look in a toolbar in the bottom, if you're in Zoom, you should have an option to start video.
Right, I did that once.
Oh, there you are.
Okay. Thank you.
You're very welcome. All right, give it about 1 more minute and then we'll go ahead and get started. And just as a heads up, so we can share this with other folks who might not be able to join us this evening, we are recording this. So just wanted to let everyone know you're more than welcome to stay muted and have your video off if you're more comfortable with that. But just wanted to make sure everybody is aware of this recording. So. Right, with that, why don't we go ahead and get started? Captain Campbell, the floor is yours.
All right. I'm gonna try and share my screen real fast.
You should be able to. If not, let me know.
Can't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Try it now.
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
Okay. So let's get this out of here. All right. Are you guys seeing the presenter one, or?
We are seeing your notes.
Okay, swap.
There we go.
What's that? Perfect. Well, good evening. As Taylor mentioned, I am Captain Jamal Campbell. We went to college, man, 2000, we graduated in 2015, and the time is flying. So once again, or thank you guys for having me. It's a huge honor to be able to present, your research. I spent a grueling year working on this master's thesis, and I'm glad it came out how it did. And also thank you, Taylor, so much for inviting me to speak to your organization. For those of you who don't know, I did my thesis focusing on UAV operators and combating PTSD and developing some mitigation strategies that the DoD as a whole can use going forward. And please, throughout this presentation, feel free to ask any questions. I would like it to be more of a discussion of ideas as I'm presenting this new information to you guys, but please feel free to ask any questions. And just to give a quick background on myself, so I went to Rochester Institute of Technology in New York, got a bachelor's in criminal justice, and simultaneously commissioned in the Marine Corps. And I did my ROTC through the U of R, and that's how I met Taylor, Best Buds for Life. After commissioning, the Marine Corps sent me to the basic school. That's every new lieutenant has to go to TBS in order to learn how to be a rifle platoon commander. So that was a good 6 months of fun, pain and tears. And then at TBS, we get our MOS designation. So I got 0802, Field Artillery Officer. So I got sent to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, which is an Army base, and we were learning side by side. They mixed the Marines and the Army soldiers together for the curriculum, and then we split off when we had to do like detailed education based on our branch. And then from Fort Sill, I went to my first duty station, Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, where I worked with 1st Battalion 10th Marines, Artillery Battalion. I got to have some fun shooting rounds and just having a grand old time. And then the Marine Corps said, all right, Jamal, you're having too much fun. It's time to send you to the Naval Postgraduate School and get some more education. And I enrolled in the 370 curriculum, which is the Information Technology Management curriculum. I graduated this summer, completed the thesis, and now I'm currently in Quantico, Virginia. And I'll be working at the Marine Corps University. I literally checked in yesterday, and I found out I'm going to be the Emerging Technology Officer with the main responsibility of finding new software, new technology that supports and hopefully betters our online training and education module, MarineNet. So yeah, that's just a quick snapshot about me. So all right, let's get into it. Let's get the fun started. So here's the outline. I like to keep things simple and clear and straight to the point. I left out most of the fine, minute details. Please read my thesis if you want all the extra information. But for the purpose of this presentation, I just wanted to highlight the main findings and my recommendations from my research. So just a quick background. So what drew my attention towards this topic? I took a course called Networked Autonomous Vehicles and Unmanned Systems. It was taught by Edward Fisher, a phenomenal professor. My time, I will say, my time at NPS, I'll just say it was half and half enjoyable, half a nightmare. This one class was it was phenomenal. It was so fun. He really allowed us to open up and discuss. We discussed things such as the future of autonomous vehicles and unmanned systems. We talked about the legalities and the ethics of using lethal machines. And the best part was he allowed us to do open forum discussions. So he presented an idea such as like autonomous cars, being spread out throughout the cities and the world, and what was our viewpoints on it. And each of the students got to, present their argument, and then we were able to like comment on each other. And it was just really, really good discussion. Unfortunately, I didn't get to that course so I did 2 years at NPS, and we got to the course during my the beginning, I'll say like a third through my last year. So it's kind of late in the game. But after the class, I was like, you know what? I'm very interested in unmanned systems. I want to see a little bit more what they do. But in the class, we read a book called Wired for War by Brian Singer. And he brought up the topic of PTSD and UAV operators, drone pilots. I'm like, this is pretty interesting. And so Professor Fisher became my advisor for my thesis, and he was very supporting. He had a lot of faith in me, and it was great. So what's the purpose of my thesis? Ultimately, just to shed light on an important matter that I feel is not talked about enough in the Air Force and the Marine Corps, throughout the whole DoD. I feel like when it comes to PTSD, is most of the discussion occurs with our boots on the ground, the guys kicking in doors, or even the actual not unmanned but manned pilots. Drop them actually flying and dropping bombs, but not enough light is shed upon the RPA operators and RPA pilots. And then my secondary purpose was to come up with some recommendations, come up with some mitigation strategies that the DoD can use as we push forward towards a future where we're going to see a lot more unmanned systems, autonomous systems being used, and we can't sacrifice our mental health of our military members. And then how did I conduct my research? I used a qualitative method, and I gathered case studies from different sources, and I tried to find similarities that I can outpick and then focus on that and develop some mitigation strategies and do some more research on that. What I originally wanted to do was, instead of a qualitative method, I want to go into a quantitative method. And it was going to involve actually getting participants, focusing on individuals who were diagnosed with PTSD during active duty or after they retired or got out of the service. And I was going to measure cortisol levels via saliva, just to see the stress measurements, and see if I can do that on a periodic interval. But unfortunately, that's when COVID hit, and they're like, "No, Jamal, you probably shouldn't, be running around getting samples of saliva from people. We're not going to approve that." So I said, all right, I'll remain flexible and adapt. So I stumbled upon a qualitative methodology. In the long run, I'm glad I went with this one, because I read a lot of good stuff. Okay. So I'm pretty sure most of you are already tracking what PTSD is, but what I've learned is there's a lot of different definitions that can vary between the different wording and whatnot. So just for my thesis, I focused on this specific definition. So I'm sorry, excuse me, full disclosure, I am doing some pet sitting at a friend's as I'm in the middle of PCSing. So if you hear any dogs jump on me or cats jump on me, I wholly apologize. So the definition is psychiatric disorder that results from a traumatic experience or witnessing a traumatic or life-threatening event from violent abuse, natural disasters, military combat, etc. Symptoms include difficulty sleeping, emotional numbness or mood swings, lashing out on family members, lashing out on peers, lashing out on even bosses, destructive behavior, ridiculous wild spending, going to the casinos, spending past your budget, and of course flashbacks, reliving that traumatic experience. And then secondary effects, substance abuse disorder. This is one that I didn't know prior to doing the research. Say a military member gets diagnosed with PTSD and now they have anxiety or depression and receive medicine for this. Sometimes that could lead to overdosing, not to the point of being fatal, but overdosing to the point where now you're truly addicted to that medicine. And then when the doctors are like, nope, sorry, we can't give you any more. We have to only give you the prescribed dose. Now that medicine can be a gateway drug to cocaine or heroin or just another destructive substance. Loss of interest at work, depression, shame or guilt. Another one that I didn't really know about, but or didn't really think about, but shame or guilt in the sense of maybe that military member throughout that traumatic event, maybe they targeted the wrong individual or the wrong enemy, and they hit kids. And so now that is a traumatic event. But say if they were very religious and that goes completely against their religion, now that forms just a shame and guilt. Now they don't feel good enough, or like they should, still be on this earth, and that could result into suicidal thoughts, suicidal tendencies. And of course, PTSD is a huge issue worldwide, but when we put a focus on our military members, now that is one affecting the military member, their life, and then that's going to trickle into our overall mission, whether it's in the Air Force or the DoD as a whole. So PTSD is a problem that we need to start thinking about more and start putting more resources and more effort into in order for us to not, fall by the wayside, if you will. Let's get into the research. So like I mentioned before, I did case studies, and I did 4 main case studies. And this is just a general overview of what the case study was and what were the commonalities between them. So internalizing trauma was one of the commonalities that I found between all four case studies. Operators, they may be exposed to traumatic events, and then they go home and they internalize it. And then they'll wake up and repeat, internalize. Why is that? So what we learned is not everybody wants to disclose that information. Not everybody wants to go public with this information. Maybe commanders aren't encouraging their subordinates to talk to them or to open up, or even go to get counseling or therapy. Even in one example that I came across, it wasn't an RPA operator, but it was an actual, it was a Harrier pilot in the Marine Corps. And he went through a traumatic event. He sought out counsel and therapy, and they just told him in the therapy session, this happens all the time. It's not a big deal. Only thing you need to do is find a hobby and stick with it, and it'll go away. So even like receiving feedback like that, like what, like, come on now, like that's definitely not good enough. That's definitely not treatment for one. And it's definitely not going to help out the individual. Maybe for that 20 minutes that they're doing a hobby, but that's traumatic is going to stick with them. And then the fear of being removed from duty or your reputation tarnished. You know, as military members, we all have our part in our military careers, and we all want to continue service. So many operators, you know, they don't want to disclose or come public with this information because they think it might be detrimental to their career. And you know, nobody wants to have their career shortened from something that we may not have been fully in control of. And especially when it comes to talking to leadership, talking to commanders, because that fear can set people back from, you know, getting the help that they need. So for the first case study, it involves the RAND Project Air Force 2015. And so the Air Force Special Operations Command hired the RAND company to pretty much do some research on their members and see just how much mental, psychological distress is going on throughout their unit. And so the RAND company, they were able to get 28 focus groups of about 186 operators, and they gave them questionnaires involving so like what do you do after you finish a mission, or how do you feel after a mission, and they use like the Likert scale, so like 1 to 10, you know, circle how bad you feel or how strongly you feel, or they'll even use like the happy faces, you know, happy, sad, moderate, neutral, just to like gauge what's going on to operators. And in addition to questionnaires, they use like open-ended questions, or you know, give them some space to just write out how they're feeling. And from this case study, the results were 70% showing towards burnout. Military members are getting exhausted from working ridiculous hours. The manning is not meeting, the manning isn't the standard, the manning isn't the TPO or the TNO. They are ridiculously short on manpower. And of course, if you're short on manpower, that does not mean that the mission requirements are going to go away. The mission still has to be done. The flights still have to be flown. So now we just have to double up the task on an RPA operator. In addition, people were revealing that their leadership wasn't really being in tune with caring for the subordinates. They felt like the leadership was putting the mission before the people. Now, that's, in a sense, coming from a military perspective, you know, that's not always bad, but when you're not even focusing on your people at all, that's when the red flags start to pop up. And that's what people were pretty much revealing and saying in these reports. For the next case study, I found a Journal of Military and Veterans Health from 2017. And it was a study that took so many different sources based off of historical data, just to see like, okay, so there was a study in 1986, there was a study in 1891. We have studies from 2000, 2017, 2010 to, you know, they want to consolidate all these sources and see they're trying to find their own commonalities. But one of the biggest things that they found, once again, was many of the surveys and questionnaires gathered were anonymous. And they're trying to figure out, why are people leaving out, you know, well, their name, their rank, and even their age, because they didn't want any of that information, reaching back to their units, because that could trickle down to commanders, and now their reputation, their career could be on the line. So once again, another instance of subordinates not really trusting commanders, unfortunately. And they found high levels of psychological distress in operators. The good thing about the reports that they found was people were being very truthful. People were opening up on these anonymous reports because they felt safe because they were anonymous. And they found a lot of people exclaiming that there's a lot of stress because of the high tempo, and because they did not feel comfortable going into therapy or comfortable going into a counseling session, and having to take a break or a timeout and sitting down for a month, not being behind the stick. Now, the third case study from Military Medicine 2020, it was a study comparing stress levels between the Air Force Special Operations Command and the Air Combat Command by using online stress assessments. And what they did was, the Air Force hired these researchers to go into these two commands because RPA operators are widely used throughout these two commands, as you guys are already tracking. And they want to get another sense of, all right, how are our military members? What's going on in their heads? How is the command climate? And so these researchers send out these online stress assessments, and once again, they're seeing burnout. Not enough operators for an infinite amount of mission requirements. But in this instance, they saw that most of their assessments were between the ages of 18 and 25-year-olds, and from the 21 to 22-year-olds on these assessments, they're already saying, "Yep, we're ready to get out of the Air Force. We can't take it anymore. We're just going to do our required time, and we're done because we can't handle this anymore." So that was a huge issue towards seeing how individuals are being pushed to that mental break point where they could possibly develop PTSD and other psychological mental distress. And then from the fourth case study that I used, I switched it up a little bit. I wanted to see what was going on in a non-military perspective, and I found this great source from the UN, the Health and Human Rights 2020 study. In this study, it surveyed university students who participated in amnesty investigations with the purpose of forming mitigation techniques against psychological distress, which is very interesting. So it was in Britain, that's where it was. They had these group of university students that were tasked with looking at graphic images of foreign events that occurred, whether it was suicide bombings, mass shootings, whatever they could find online, they had to investigate these events. And so after 3 years, they noticed that, students, they would back out. They said, nope, I can't do this anymore. I'm out. And so they hired researchers to come in and see, what can we do to better the workload of these students. And so they came up with, after doing the research and sending out the surveys and getting the feedback, they developed these 3 techniques, or found these 3 techniques that kind of helped out. So reducing the volume. So once again, they're investigating these these traumatic events online. So they're on a computer, looking via a monitor, and there might be some audio with these events that they're witnessing or investigating. And they found that reducing the volume helps because now they're not connecting that auditory response with their own emotions. But the flaw with this one is you can't really turn off the sound, because now that's you're kind of pulling back on your actual investigation. You're missing out on some actual data for your investigation. But students found that that was one of the top ones. The next one was working with a partner. And this gave students a sense of security, like they have like a safe line next to them. But the issue with that is they have different shifts for the students. And so they can't have 10 students in at one time. Sometimes it might just be one student per hour, so they can't there may not always be a time for somebody to have a partner. So although it is a great technique, it is not always feasible. But the last one, limiting exposure to graphic images, was found to be the best. And this means them being briefed what they are expected to see in these investigations. And so prior to them going in and doing their actual investigation, they'll be prepared with similar content, similar graphics to kind of give them a heads up on what they would expect. In this example graphic content would be more of nothing real, but more of paintings and drawings, just to ease that student into what they're about to actually investigate. And so the student said that was like the #1 choice, and it helped them out a lot. So here I said we got the top 3 techniques, but they also came up with other techniques that involves drawing boundaries between work and personal life, learning more from experienced members, and the last one is a combination of these techniques. And they thought that the most problematic was drawing boundaries between work and personal life, because although it's great to say it out loud, it's not very easy to put that into practice. And so why is this case study relevant to my thesis? So similar to UAV pilots and operators, these students are looking at graphic images via a monitor. It's not a video game. It's not some make-believe stuff. This is real life actual stuff. And some of these images that either the pilots and the operators and these students are seeing, they can be traumatic. So possibly using some of the techniques that this research in this case study came up with and applying that to the Air Force and DoD as a whole can be very beneficial. So upon all of my research and looking at the case studies and doing the basic literature review on PTSD and RPA operators and pilots, these were Jamal's top causes of PTSD in UAV operators. So overwhelming workloads, an insufficient number of operators, and the lack of encouraging support. Now, as you can already see, the first two, they are closely related, and the overwhelming workloads is basically a function of, not having enough operators, not having enough operators to go and conduct the missions. And then a lack of encouraging support really hits home for me, because no, I'm not a drone operator, but being an officer, I've had Marines under me, and what I've heard from other either Marines or either my peers, leadership are very crucial when it comes to a Marine or any subordinate, very crucial in ensuring that they are receiving care. And it sounds interesting when I'm saying it out loud, because we're in this military mindset, but you gotta take care of your subordinates, because without them you can't get the mission done. And it seems that the commanders that I was reading about in the research, they were just treating the subordinates as just a resource or a means to an end, just to ensure mission accomplishment. So for the conclusion of my thesis, I came up with these 5 recommendations in order to mitigate PTSD in UAV operators. So the first one, we got to address the workload and the insufficient number of personnel. So restructuring the qualification of RPA pilots and sensor operators. And when I say that, I'm focusing on prior to even finishing boot camp, when they walk into the office, everybody has to do the ASVAB. And, in order to be an operator, you have to score very high on ASVAB in order to even qualify to even get that job on paper. And so my recommendation is, I feel like the high ASVAB is, yes, it can say, this guy or gal shows potential for being able to complete and do this MOS, but I think that should be put to the test after they finish boot camp, and when they get to the schoolhouse, if they are passing with flying colors, then yeah, they earned it. You don't need a specific ASVAB score to say, yeah, you're good. We see potential. You can definitely go. You'll definitely be successful at this, because we all know that just because you get a high ASVAB score doesn't mean you're going to be golden. You're going to be successful. So just restructuring those qualifications. That way, now we can get more RPA pilots, more sensor operators into the mix, into the flow. So that way we can hopefully plus up the number of personnel in these roles. Next is shift work. So expand UAV units to more areas worldwide to reduce shifts. And so in order to combat the workloads and to combat the burnout, UAV pilots, they have to work 10, 12-hour shifts. And sure, they may be in America, but they could be conducting a mission in a completely different time zone with a 14-hour difference or whatnot. And so now they have to be up at specific times here in the States or wherever they are in order to meet a mission requirement elsewhere. And now we're being burned out, we're tired, and now we're getting a little bit pissed off, So if we can just expand the units worldwide, that could possibly reduce some of that burnout. And then with the first one, also reducing the burnout by getting more pilots, more operators, at the state, so people don't have to double up on missions and tasks. And I know that recommendation with the shift work, expanding UAV units to different areas, I know that's a lot of time and most of all money. But if we can make it work, hopefully one day we can get to there. And then encouraging support and counseling. And that starts with changing the command climate, especially with the focus on the leadership. Commanders, leadership, whether they are squadron commanders, battalion commanders, what have you, they need to make an encouraging climate, an encouraging environment, to be able to allow these operators to feel safe, that they can report or go to a counselor or go into therapy in order to get better. Like commanders can't be telling the subordinates, no, I don't care, I don't care, or don't tell me, go tell somebody else. Like, they need to have an open door policy, and that also goes into monitoring. Commanders need to be checking up on subordinates, making sure that, hey, I was looking over your mission run, or I was looking over your flight. I noticed this happened. do you want to talk about it, or let's talk about it, you know? Or if, say, that subordinate says, you know, sir, ma'am, I'd like to talk about it, but maybe not right now with you, that commander should be able to say, oh, no problem. I can definitely point you in this direction. I know similarly, I know you have some peers who've done the same mission. I coordinated a group session, and that's going into the second point with therapy. CISM, which is critical incident stress management, it's broken down. It's used very heavily in functions with or sessions with the VA, and that's focusing on diffusing and debriefing. And diffusion is not necessarily a reflection. It's more like stating the facts, getting them from that mental experience and getting them out in the open on paper. You know, going over what you do. You know, how do you feel right now? Do you need any assistance right now? And this should happen within the first 12 hours of that mission being completed. And, you know, that subordinate, the operator will be like, oh, I'm good. Everything. I'll check back in for you next in a couple of days. Now that's where the debriefing comes into play.
November 6, 1944.
And now that should be caught within the first 72 hours. So now we are really getting into that deflection. We're really getting into that group session to either talk about their experience, how it's affected them. In that way, that commander can, you know, identify any individuals at risk, and even inform, you know, that group of subordinates or even that one operator, you know, counseling services, contacts, and phone numbers and whatnot. And then effect labeling, that is basically just putting feelings into words. And it doesn't have to necessarily be words. It can be pictures, like I was saying earlier, like the happy face, frown face, neutral face. That tends to basically research shows that helps people communicate how they're feeling. Because sometimes, you know, people might not be okay or comfortable with talking out loud about their emotions or how they're feeling. And so using this effect labeling is a great gateway to reflecting and seeing if an individual might need some extra help. And of course, the group sessions, especially amongst peers, you know, or maybe you don't need an officer present, but a senior enlisted or an NCO, you know, will feel comfortable just talking amongst each other. And then the cortisol testing and therapy, like I mentioned earlier, also, as soon as an operator gets done with the flight mission, they can take a saliva sample because they may not feel like talking. They take a saliva sample, tester, get that stress measurement, and then in 3 days, a week, a month, continue to monitor those stress and cortisol levels. And then that's some good quantitative data for people to say, hey, sir, ma'am, you know, so Lance Corporal, I'm trying to think of some Air Force ranks. Airman Johnson, you know, his cortisol levels are high now. We may need to, you know, intervene and sit down and talk to said individual. And then training. I know throughout the DoD, all the branches, you know, all we talk about is training. But when it comes to billets and positions where you are exposed possibly every time you sit down to a traumatic event or a possible traumatic event, that extra training, the extra detailed one-on-one training to identify or to how to just be better at identifying targets, or to be comfortable with not pulling the trigger if you don't feel comfortable. Just that detailed and sufficient training and getting enough training, not being streamlined and, training cut short because of sure mission requirement. But even if you are jumping to a mission, that training should still continue, because we don't want to put untrained operators out into the field. But yeah, that's the gist of what my thesis went into. And I would love if you guys have any questions or feedback. I'm down. I'm here to listen or answer.
Yeah, Jamal, Dave Harrington here. I really liked your presentation, and I have a few comments and some experience with PTSD. Here's a couple of things I suggest that maybe a program can be developed in your solutions area to develop civilian contractors that will hire military pilots to fly, retired military pilots, guys that just recently retired in their 40s, to operate the UAVs. These guys are more mature and they have experience, and a lot of them are looking for jobs. So I have a friend who did just that at Fort Irwin. I think it's Fort Irwin, right, where the Army trains troops that are going to deploy, and they have realistic training for Afghanistan and Iraq. It's probably cutting back now, but he worked for a contractor who developed that realistic training and put it into action. They actually built the systems, the buildings that they did training in. So that kind of model is available. So if contractors could be hired to run some of the UAV programs and then hire retired military pilots, that might reduce the workload on the young guys that are just starting, and the pilots will have experience and may be able to deal with it better. Another comment is in your worldwide dispersal idea, one thing that would do, it would get the UAV pilots away from their home. All right, they could be TDY or TAD to a place, let's say Guam. They set up a operation in Guam or even Hawaii, and then the operators wouldn't be able to go home. They'd go to the hotel or barracks or whatever, like most guys do in combat. So one of the problems is they work 14 hours and they go home at daybreak, and the kids got to go to school, and the wife doesn't have anything fixed for lunch, and they got issues. The dog has to go to the vet or something that deals with home life, that doesn't give them time to get sufficient rest before they turn around to their next 14-hour shift. So that dispersal idea is really good because of if you put more emphasis on what it does, it gets these guys away from their home life to be in combat. Like most of us who've been in combat know, you can't go home at night. You just go back to the barracks and go back to work the next day. And then I've dealt with therapy, and a lot of therapists are coming into that business because they have an alcohol problem, or they have a drug problem, or they have a sex abuse problem, or overeaters problem. They get into a therapy business in a counseling business. So they're the experts in that area of therapy. So if you could steer some separated UAV people into education for therapists, and then get a job at the local therapy company, that would be a place where the guys that are getting burned out could get professional training. That would be exactly what they need, because they've got an expert there at that therapy business that will be able to talk to him because he's been there. And that's the way most therapy companies work, therapy businesses. They get an expert that can relate one-to-one on this guy, or lead group discussions like you suggested. So, and it's also an education for the separated UAV operator. So anyhow, those are some ideas that I thought as you went along, just because of the experience I have with PTSD and some of my friends that are in that same business. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate those comments. And man, I wish I would have stumbled upon that doing my research. I would have included it. But I agree with you 100%. The one point you said I did come across with the dispersal, operators, dealing with the 14-hour day and having to come home and dealing with their spouses' requirements, kids, just the day-to-day. And then, yep, just like you said, sir, waking up and getting right back to the job. And that just, the family life just compounds on the mental distress. Because even though, they go home, they may not want to talk with their wives or talk with their husbands. And now their spouses is, building up frustration, like, why do you want to talk to me, and all that. But just like a regular combat deployment, once you get out there, that's where your mind is. That's, your focus, you have to worry about back home. You're just there to do the mission, and then you're surrounded by people who are doing the same thing. And, now you may feel free to talk with them a little bit more. But yeah, I totally agree 100%, sir.
So Jamal, I've got some comments for you as well. I retired from the Air Force 30 years ago, and I started flying drones for the military 3 years ago. So I had the opportunity to get back in the game, if you will. And when I was going through my checkout program, most of the people there were younger than my children. So I think one of the things that the military has done, and even before I got into the drone business, I thought the Air Force handled their manning and personnel assignments very poorly and put young people in positions that they weren't prepared for. And in World War II, we had to draft people and do that. But I'm not sure that we have to do that now. And I think if you had a more mature force doing this, you would have less PTSD. I noticed going through my training, I was not nearly as stressed out as a lot of the other people were trying to learn the stuff and get ready to do the things that they needed to do, because I had been through it before. I've been checked out in 2 different kinds of airplanes. I've flown 1,000 hours in both of them. And now I'm coming into a new airframe. It's just another opportunity. It was a lot more comfortable to me going through that process. And I would take off on the weekends and go into town and have a good time. And these people would stay in the hotel all weekend and study and come back to work still tired on Monday morning. So I think a more mature workforce would be a lot better all the way around. To take a 18, 19-year-old kid and put them in the cockpit and watch people getting blown up, they're going to be stressed out. There is no doubt about it. I'm not saying that an older person wouldn't be stressed out, but they have a lot more life experience behind them to know what's going on and why they're doing what they're doing. So I am a contractor, as the previous speaker mentioned. One of the problems with contractors is they can't be in the kill chain. Geneva Convention prevents us from delivering weapons. So it has to be a military person delivering weapons. And that's the bottom line. the deployed situation, in my situation, the company I work for, when I deploy, I work 7 days a week, 12 hours on, 12 hours off. But I only do that for 3 months, and then I go home and I have a dwell period for 3 months or more. I've deployed it once a year. Military doesn't have that manpower, which is a problem. We had a person, I see a river rats patch here, and I'm a river rat. We had a river rats convention in Las Vegas one year. The commander at Creech came to talk to us. And he said, basically, they were building drones faster than they could build aircrew members. And so once you got assigned to the drone business, it was just like the Hotel California. You can check in, but you can't check out. There's just no way to get out of the business, and that's a shame. Three years working that kind of shift, the kids at Creech are just going bananas. So you're exactly right. They've got to get more people involved. They've got to lessen the workload, and they got to find some ways to get people dwell time because they need to unwind. And those are my thoughts for you. The one I don't know. Have you read the book? I forget the author's name, but it's called "Killing by Remote Control." That's a book you probably need to look at because he's going to talk to you about the business of doing what we're doing and what people have to put up with. So I'd just leave you with those thoughts.
You said killing by remote control?
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you.
And when you mention Creech, you're talking about Creech Field or Creech Air Force Base. Some people might not understand that.
Not General Creech.
Right. You're talking about his air.
I'm
named
talking
airfield.
about. I'm talking what used to be called Indian Springs up northwest of Las Vegas.
Right.
So, yeah. So who's our river rats person there? Speak up. All right.
No pressure, no pressure.
I will say that as since they're not speaking up, I'll talk a little bit about river rats because one of the main several purposes of river rats. One is to take care of the families of KIAs, MIAs, and POWs. We provide scholarships for them. But another thing is, as was mentioned by the previous speaker, it's a mentoring group where you got people of like business talking to each other all the time. So you got the old heads with the young heads taking care of each other, helping them out in an informal environment where you get out of the chain of command and you're just a bunch of guys and gals at the bar shooting the breeze and taking care of each other, which is vitally important. And one of the things that the River Rats does very, very well.
Hey, Rich, this is Greg Lewis. I have a little switchology issue here.
Okay,
I was
Greg.
fumbling around on my iPad. I'm sitting out on my patio. Might be drinking a martini because it's happy hour out here.
There you go.
But no, I have really enjoyed this. And I am the executive director of the River Rats. And I'm very interested in this because we are debating among ourselves. And I'm very supportive personally of bringing RPV pilots into our fold because, as I told our board meeting last week, I used to be a member of the 78th Fighter Squadron, A-10s over at Bentwaters. They're now the 78th Attack Squadron at Creech. They hosted our 100-year anniversary party a couple of years ago. And, as I said, they're killing a lot more bad guys than I have lately. and I, that's the warrior mentality that the Rats stand for. And we need to bring them into the fold, in my opinion. And Jamal, I'll just tell you, in my second career, I was 18 years with Southwest, and it was a great second career. But I was flying once with this guy, and it was during a real lull when we were hiring, and great Air Force guy flying with the Texas National Guard out of Houston. And when this trip was over, he hands me this probation sheet, and I went, huh? We haven't hired anybody in years. What, you on probation? And he goes, yeah, he said, I got hired, then I got recalled to active duty. I'm flying Reapers out of Houston. And, he did that for 2 or 3 years and came back to Southwest. But so we started talking, and he just said, I got to tell you, it's weird. I blow somebody away, and an hour later, I'm picking up my kids at a soccer match. And, so I kind of get that. And I find your presentation fascinating. And I also will tell you, just decades ago after Desert Storm, I got assigned, it was a great assignment actually, to conduct this study of the how well the intel community supported Desert Storm. And so part of that, I interviewed General Horner, and of course this was 30 something years ago, 28 probably, but we now have the technology to have the Air Operations Center in the United States and not have to deploy. And of course, it's even way better now. But I said, is that a good thing? And he looked at me and he goes, no. He said, if you are in the States, you're with your family, you're not into the war. You don't know what's going on. It's not your 24/7 thing. And he was very concerned about that way back when. And so I kind of see now, what he was worried about kind of coming to fruition, if you will. But anyway, I found this fascinating. I thank you. And I think, we are slowly trying to convince our members that this is the new warfare and they need the mentoring and everything that I'm the next generation. I was raised by our Vietnam charter members, but they need that same mentoring that I got. It's just in a different way. But anyway, Rich, sorry, I was fumbling trying to get off.
No, I'm glad you came up, and I'll see you in October. But yeah, I'm a legacy rat. I got my patch flying to North Vietnam, and you're exactly right. I mean, we would come home, we go to the squadron bar, we could blow steam off and take care of each other, as opposed to, and again, when the commander at Creech came and talked to the rats when we had our reunion there, he said the exact same thing that your friend said. He says, it's just absolutely incredible. I get up in the morning, have breakfast with the kids, send them off to school, kiss my wife goodbye, go drive out to Creech, start blowing people up, go back home, have dinner, and go to bed. And it's a total transition. It's a juxtaposition that's hard to explain. And I can remember when I was stationed at Karat, and I could have a weekend off. I'd go down to Bangkok. I go to Bangkok, and I'm in the the Siam Intercontinental Hotel, and nobody there has a clue that there's a war going on, and I'm flying combat daily. Just a big mental mind warp that you have to deal with, going from a peacetime environment to a wartime environment, back and forth. And I think the rats can do a lot of good for the RPA crews that are dealing with that. So
Couldn't agree more. God bless. And your article was great.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, well, we support you in bringing RPAs, and that was a struggle for us in our organization as well. And the folks at Creech were some of the strongest opponents to that, the old guys. So we've seen a lot of really good involvement and engagement from our RPA pilots, and we have one of the training squadrons at Randolph where our headquarters is. So we actually have our next graduation. We're giving an award to the top grad on Friday afternoon. So it's been really great to connect with that community. I don't know how far you're planning on taking this in your future career as far as recommendations go, but I have a couple of questions or things to think of myself. So I'm actually the daughter of an MC-130 navigator, and it's been really interesting over the course of my dad's career to see how much smoother, I guess, the transition was coming out of combat missions where he was flying with an air crew on the 130 versus positions of responsibility later, where you're not sharing the responsibility with the crew and the experience with the crew. And with RPA units, I wonder how much you've looked at what you would make, or suggest to commanders or leadership in terms of how you sort of create a level of comfort in that sort of group setting. as people are kind of operating as individuals instead of as a crew. I've noticed that's been a big trend in my dad's career, is he's doing better when he's had that time to decompress with the rest of the people that he's flying with versus when he's, having to make decisions on his own kind of, and doesn't have that stopgap in that space to do the decompression time. So does that actually look like? Like, how have you played that out in terms of changing that leadership climate and creating that space? We talk about it all the time in like our work at Dedallians, but we've struggled to see how it plays out. So kind of curious. And then the other thing I would ask about is, as operators, they may have experience knowing that their people need this, but how do you convince people who plan and see a greater dependence on unmanned systems from an acquisitions perspective and defense strategy, understanding that, as they're looking at budget and mission objectives, the importance of caring for the people and building in that extra time, or even though, it may be more cost effective to rely on an unmanned piece of equipment instead of, a stealth fighter jet, building in that extra space in the budget line for additional training time, more expanded units, expanded presence. You don't have as small a, group that you're depending on. That, have you thought about how those conversations might go, or how that might change culturally is a question I'd have too. So.
Taylor, let me thank you for doing this. The Dedallians have a great way to make contributions to the whole thing too. And I appreciate having this conversation and presentation. And please say hello to Maureen for me.
I guess to answer your first question, I would say it starts at day one. So as soon as that commander, joins a unit, I would imagine that whoever the senior enlisted is probably going to introduce that commander to the crew. And it starts then. That commander needs to present himself and make himself completely available. And now I'm assuming these crews are about 5 to 10 people. I've worked with, so I was XO of the battery, and I had about 120 Marines under me. So if I can make myself available and have that open office, that open door mentality, go and check on all the Marines on a weekly basis, I would feel that commander can definitely do that with a crew between 5 to 10 people. I would also say it starts coming into, it's a matter of being professional. because I think of caring for your subordinates is definitely an aspect of maintaining that professionalism. But on the flip side of that, that also takes into consideration the personality of that commander. And I think not everyone can take it to that next level, whether it's because they're too stubborn or they are just not, they don't think that is the correct way to lead or command. So I guess it's actually, it's a pretty complex answer or question answer. But I think it definitely starts with day one, making sure that your subordinates know who you are, what you're all about, and being open, and allowing for that active communication, especially when it's a crew of that size. There shouldn't be any hostility. There shouldn't be any, trying to think of the politically correct terms.
I get what you're saying. Yeah.
He shouldn't be like, that commander shouldn't come in thinking like he's the man, that everybody reports to him, or trying to, flaunt his shiny stuff around, and then it's definitely a matter of the personality too, and realizing that, sure, you might think you're hard and strong and ridiculous and bold, but you still need to be able to hear out your subordinates. You still need to be able to allow them to feel comfortable in that command climate in order to bring forth, whatever on their mind, whatever mental fatigue they're going through or mental distress they're going through. And to answer your second question, I haven't really thought too much in terms of money, resources, and acquisitions perspective, but I would say it is 100% possible. It starts with just planning. Obviously we're not going to be able to make anything happen within the year. And usually when it comes to these big time military planning, we're looking 10 years, 20 years, 25 years in the future. And it just starts with simple planning and budgeting. Especially, I think it's going to become easier and it's going to pick up faster once we start rolling out, new technology, especially when it comes to developing even better lethal unmanned systems. And even when we get to those autonomous systems, it's going to be a lot easier to realize the impact that putting forth either resources when it comes to either therapists and counselors, or putting resources towards recruitment. When I say resources like staff and money in order to bring on these new recruits. And even if it comes to moving whatever RPA bases and units worldwide, and maybe it's not best to keep everything central or keep everything local in the States, I just feel like, yeah, definitely if we plan it, it can happen. Yeah, it can definitely happen. We just gotta make a plan. All right, 20 years.
Yeah.
20 years, we're gonna have more bases. We have more bases worldwide.
Yeah. From my perspective, I see a lot of potential if you start changing some of or adding to PME curriculum, both from the acquisition side and also a leadership side, or like across services, more of the culture change happening, and then you're building up leaders who can inform those decisions as they're moving into the roles where they're contributing to planning as an approach that would be a beginning of basis for this to work. And yeah, it was interesting at convention this week. Admiral Gilday called out industry for promoting older systems and compromising budget and strategy for that. So it's an interesting time to see how leadership is changing and the narrative is changing about what we need to be focusing on too. So
can I throw in an observation for you, Jamal? That there's a atmosphere in the Air Force of, particularly in the fighter community, when you go into the briefing room, there is no rank. Everybody's a pilot or a navigator or a wizzo, and you go into the briefing room, you're going to be heart to heart with each other about what you did right and what you did wrong. And the captain flight lead can tell the 06, sir, you screwed up here. This is what happened, and this is what we need to do better. And conversely, the 06 can talk to the captain and lieutenant, and you don't feel nearly as threatened when you're talking to another pilot as opposed to when you're talking to a full colonel. It works out really well, and that's an Air Force mentality that I'm working with the Marines right now. I don't see that because the discipline structure in the Marine Corps is a lot different than the discipline structure in the Air Force. And I can remember as a lieutenant, I was checked out as a flight lead, leading combat flights in Vietnam. I got my check ride from the check pilot. I passed my check ride, and the very next ride, my wingman was the wing commander. And that was my real check ride, because he was going to see how the lieutenant did. And he got out of position when we were attacking a target. I made a call over the radio. I said, sir, move it out farther. And that was the only thing he had for me in the debrief. He says, don't ever call me sir over the radio, because that makes me a target. I'm 2. I said, yes, sir. So that debrief is that debrief environment where you just go in and you're all equal. You're all pilots, you're all aircrew members, and you're talking to each other, trying to get better, is a really good thing to have, and that needs to be worked on.
Absolutely. One of my buddies, he's a Cobra pilot, and he was telling me the same thing where you're saying, sir. Like, whenever they get to a debrief, they're like ridiculously, like, basically chill with each other. They're upfront, you know, they're not holding anything back, because they're like, if I can give you some feedback that's gonna save your life, I'm not holding back, man. But it's interesting, in the Marine Corps, he was telling me that he went into, or he had a talk with some of his pilot friends, the fixed wing guys, and he said, you know, he assumes that since he's a rotary wing pilot, that all pilots across the Marine Corps is going to have that same mindset, that same mentality. But to his surprise, like, his buddy, he said, "Oh, dang, I wish I was I wish I was flying Cobras with you guys, because when we debrief, it's not like that." So it's very interesting. It's very interesting that we are not at that point, completely at that point yet, where everybody can just debrief and just get everything off their chest, because at the end of the day, the reason why you're receiving critiques and whatnot is to freaking save your life, like, or to save your life, to save your crew's life, you know. Yeah, I just wish we can fast forward and finally get to that point, but I guess small steps.
I don't know if anybody has additional comments or questions. Last call at the bar for those. But all right, well, I think this was a very productive discussion that we all enjoyed. Thank you for coming. From the Dedallion's perspective, we are trying to do more of these and make them more dialogue oriented. And you should also notice some changes in our next magazine issue, where one of the features that I was very fortunate to get, a friend of mine who just came off of being a flight surgeon with an HH-60 crew was stationed at Creech. And so he's doing his piece on recommendations for culture change and treatment changes in treating RPA pilots and the pilot community generally in dealing with PTSD. So that's going to be in the next issue, which is focused on medicine and flight. So be on the lookout for that. And, you know, stay tuned, and we'll be having a speaker a month, hopefully some more really good discussions. So thank you so much for sharing, Captain Campbell, and sharing your wisdom and your time, and for everybody for coming.
Rich, great seeing you.
Thank you.
Jamal, thank you so much. Yeah.
Appreciate you all. You guys have a
Bye, y'all. Yeah.
Oh, and also, and then I know Taylor has my thesis, so she can send it out to you guys. And she has, if you guys think of any more ideas or suggestions, you can just send them my way. Thank you, guys.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
You bet. Cheers.
Adios.